third attempt. The word was handkerchief. She was not weeping in comfort. Mrs. Tams was aware of the right drawer, and drew from it a little white thing, yet not so little, for Rachel was Rachel, and shook out its quadrangular folds, and it seemed beautiful in the gaslight, and Rachel took it and sobbed, "Thank you." Mrs. Tams rose higher than even a general servant. She was the soubrette, the confidential maid, the very echo of the young and haughty mistress, leagued with the worshipped creature against the wickedness and wile of a whole sex. Mrs. Tams had no illusions save the sublime illusion that her mistress was an angel and a martyr. Mrs. Tams had been married, and she had seen a daughter married. She was an authority on first quarrels, and could and did tell tales of first quarrels, tales in which the husband, while admittedly an utterly callous monster, had at the same time somehow some leaven of decency. Soon she was launched in the epic recital of the birth and death of a grandchild. Rachel, being a married woman like the rest, could probably listen to every interesting and recondite detail. Rachel sobbed and sympathized with the classic tale, and both women, as it was unrolled, kept well in their minds the vision of the vile man, mysterious and implacable, alone in the parlour. Occasionally Mrs. Tams listened for a footstep, ready discreetly to withdraw at the slightest symptom on the stairs. Once, when she did this, Rachel murmured weakly, "He won't," and then lapsed into new weeping. And after a little time Mrs. Tams departed. 6. Mrs. Tams had decided to undertake an enterprise involving extreme gallantry, surpassing the physical. She went downstairs and stood outside the parlour door, which was not quite shut. Within the parlour, or throne-room, existed a beautiful and superior being, full of grace and authority, who belonged to a race quite different from her own, who was beyond her comprehension, who commanded her and kept her alive and paid money to her, who accepted her devotion casually as a right, who treated her as a soft cushion between himself and the drift and inconvenience of the world, and who, occasionally, as a supreme favour, caught her a smart slap on the back, which flattered her to excess. She went into the throne-room if she was called thither, or if she had cleansing or tidying work there. She spoke to the superior being if he spoke to her. But she had never till then conceived the breathtaking scheme of entering the throne-room for a purpose of her own, and addressing the superior being without an invitation to do so. Nevertheless, since by long practice she was courageous, she meant to execute the scheme, and she began by knocking at the door. Although Rachel had seriously warned her that for a domestic servant to knock at the parlour door was a grave sin, she simply could not help knocking. Not to knock seemed to her wantonly sacrilegious. Thus she knocked, and a voice told her to come in. There was the superior being, his back to the fire and his legs apart, formidable. She curtsied, another sin according to the new code. Then she discovered that she was inarticulate. "Well?" Words burst from her. "Her's crying her eyes out up yon, mister." And Mrs. Tams also snivelled. The superior being frowned and said testily, yet not without a touch of careless toleration, "Oh, get away, you silly old fool of a woman." Mrs. Tams got away, not entirely ill content. In the lobby she heard an unusual rapping on the glass of the front door, and sharply opened it to inform the late disturber that there existed a bell and a knocker for respectable people. A shabby youth gave her a note for Louis Fores, Esquire, and said that there was an answer, so that she was forced to renew the enterprise of entering the throne-room. Stairs, his wife heard him and shook in bed from excitement at the crisis which approached, but she could never have divined the nature of the phenomenon by which the unbridgeable breach was about to be closed. "Louise!" "Yes," she whimpered. Then she ventured to spy at his face through an interstice of the bedclothes, and saw thereon a most queer white expression. "Someone's just brought this. Read it." He gave her the note, and she deciphered it as well as she could. "Dear Louis, if you aren't gone to bed, I want to see you tonight about that missing money of aunt's. I've something I must tell you and Rachel. I'm at the 3 Tons. Julian Maldon." "But what does he mean?" demanded Rachel, roused from her heavy mood of self-pity. "I don't know." "But what can he mean?" she insisted. "Haven't a notion." "But he must mean something." Louis asked, "Well, what should you say he means?" "How very strange," Rachel murmured, not attempting to answer the question. "And the 3 Tons? Why does he write from the 3 Tons? What's he doing at the 3 Tons? Isn't it a very low public house? And everybody thought he was still in South Africa. I suppose, then, it must have been him that we saw tonight." "You may bet it was." "Then why didn't he come straight here? That's what I want to know. He couldn't have called before we got here, because if he had, Mrs. Tams would have told us." Louis nodded. "Didn't you think Mr. Batchry looked very queer when you mentioned Julian tonight?" Rachel continued to express her curiosity and wonder. "No, I didn't notice anything particular," Louis replied vaguely. Throughout the conversation his manner was self-conscious. Rachel observed it while feigning the contrary, and in her turn grew uneasy and even self-conscious also. Further, she had the feeling that Louis was depending upon her for support, and perhaps for initiative. His glance, though furtive, had the appealing quality which rendered him sometimes so exquisitely wistful to her. As he stood over her by the bed, he made a peculiar compound of the negligent, dominant masculine and the clinging feminine. "And why didn't he let anybody know of his return?" Rachel went on. Louis, veering towards the masculine, clenched the immediate point. "The question before the meeting is," he smiled demurely, "what answer am I to send?" "I suppose you must see him to-night." "Nothing else for it, is there? Well, I'll scribble him a bit of a note." "But I shan't see him, Louis." "No?" In an instant Rachel thought to herself, "He doesn't want me to see him." Aloud she said, "I should have to dress myself all over again. Besides, I'm not fit to be seen." She was referring, without any apparent sort of shame, to the redness of her eyes. "Well, I'll see him by myself, then." Louis turned to leave the bedroom, whereat Rachel was very disconcerted and disappointed. Although the startling note from Julian had alarmed her and excited her in profound apprehensions whose very nature she would scarcely admit to herself, the main occupation of her mind was still her own quarrel with Louis. The quarrel was now over, for they had conversed in quite sincere tones of friendliness, but she had desired and expected an overt, tangible proof and symbol of peace. That proof and symbol was a kiss. Louis was at the door. He was beyond the door. She was lost. "Louis!" she cried. He put his face in at the door. "Will you just pass me my hand mirror? It's on the dressing table." Louis was thrilled by this simple request. The hand mirror had arrived in the house as a wedding present. It was backed with tortoiseshell, and seemingly the one thing that had reconciled Rachel the downright to the possession of a hand mirror was the fact that the tortoiseshell was real tortoiseshell. She had made out that a hand mirror was too frivolous an object for the dressing table of a serious Five Towns woman. She had always referred to it as the hand mirror, as though disdaining special ownership. She had derided it once by using it in front of Louis with the mimic foolish graces of an empty-headed doll. And now she was asking for it because she wanted it, and she had said "my hand mirror." This revelation of the odalisque in his Rachel enchanted Louis, and incidentally it also enchanted Rachel. She had employed a desperate remedy, and the result on both of them filled her with a most surprising gladness. Louis judged it to be deliciously right that Rachel should be anxious to know whether her weeping had indeed made her into an object improper for the beholding of the male eye, and Rachel, to her astonishment, shared his opinion. She was vain, and they were both well content. In taking it she touched his hand. He bent and kissed her. Each of them was ravaged by formidable fears for the future, tremendously disturbed in secret by the mysterious word from Julian, and yet that kiss stood unique among their kisses, and in their simplicity they knew not why. And as they kissed they hated Julian and the past and the whole world for thus coming between them and deranging their love. They would, had it been possible, have sold all the future for tranquillity in that moment. Part 7. Going downstairs, Louis found Mrs. Tams standing in the back part of the lobby between the parlour door and the kitchen. Obviously she had stationed herself there in order to keep watch on the messenger from the 3 Tons. As the master of the house approached with dignity the foot of the stairs, the messenger stirred, and in the classic manner of messengers fingered uneasily his hat. The fingers were dirty. The hat was dirty and shabby. It had been somebody else's hat before coming into the possession of the messenger. The same applied to his jacket and trousers. The jacket was well cut, but green. The trousers, with their ragged, muddy edges, yet betrayed a pattern of distinction. Round his neck the messenger wore a thin muffler, and on his feet an exhausted pair of tennis shoes. These noiseless shoes accentuated and confirmed the stealthy glance of his eyes. Except for an unshaven chin and the confidence-destroying quality that lurked subtly in his aspect, he was not repulsive to look upon. His features were delicate enough, his restless mouth was even pretty, and his carriage graceful. He had little of the coarseness of industrialism, probably because he was not industrial. His age was about 20, and he might have sold signals in the street or run illegal errands for street bookmakers. At any rate, it was certain that he was not above earning a chance copper from a customer of the 3 Tons. His clear destiny was never to inspire respect or trust, nor to live regularly, save conceivably in prison, nor to do any honest daily labour. And if he did not know this, he felt it. All his movements were those of an outcast, who both feared and execrated the organism that was rejecting him. Louis, elegant, self-possessed, and superior, passed into the parlour exactly as if the messenger had been invisible. He was separated from the messenger by an immeasurable social prestige. He was raised to such an altitude above the messenger that he positively could not see the messenger with the naked eye, and yet for one fraction of a second he had the illusion of being so intimately akin to the messenger that a mere nothing might have pushed him into those vile clothes and endowed him with that furtive look and that sinister aspect of a helot. For one infinitesimal instant he was the messenger, and shuddered.